Commissioners, we're moving back to item number 13. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 167603, Block 812, Lot 1. It's 485 7th Avenue, aka 41-49 7th Avenue, and 155-163 West 36th Street, the Mills Hotel number 3, an individual landmark. This is a neo-Renaissance style residential hotel building designed by Copeland and Dole and built in 1906-07. The application is to alter the base of the building, remove a chimney, alter interior light courts, replace storefront infill and signage, and construct a rooftop addition.
Nearly as hard as I started right at Mac. But no raises, no curves.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Olivia Brzee, Preservation Staff. The item is 485 7th Avenue, the Mills Hotel number 3, individual landmark. It is located on the northeast corner of 7th Avenue and West 36th Street, and it was constructed in 1907 as a residential hotel for working men. And as Jared mentioned, the application is to alter the base of the building, remove a chimney, alter interior light courts, replace storefront infill and signage, and construct a rooftop addition. And I'll introduce Bill Higgins of Higgins Quays Barth & Partners to walk you through the background of the building.
Thank you, Olivia. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Bill Higgins of Higgins Quays Barth. I'd like to give you historical background, which we think is relevant to your decision, and a sort of executive summary of the work that is proposed. So this building, as Olivia said, constructed in 1907 as a residence for working men. It was constructed, designed by Copeland and Dole, who were alumni of the Office of Ernest Flagg around the time that Ernest Flagg was doing low, modest income housing projects. And this is the sort of hotel version of that. It was designated quite recently with the support of the owner, the Lightstone Group, who is here today and is the owner making this proposal.
Excuse me.
The building ceased to be a hotel decades ago, and this proposal is one which would return it to its original hotel use. So we think there's a functional quality about this that's important. The designation really talks mostly about the building's function, although what it says about the building's architecture, it quotes an early critic saying that the building has the severe simplicity of utilitarian purpose. It's a nice phrase, I think, and it just about sums up the architectural character of this building. So originally, this is 7th Avenue, and this is 36th Street. Originally, the main entrance was here on 36th Street, and originally there was this base with individual windows and an areaway with windows partly below grade. Here is the building now on the 36th Street side, looking into that original main entrance, and here it is on the 7th Avenue side. The base of the building began to change in the 1940s, changed more substantially in the 1950s when this parking garage was introduced on the east end of the 36th Street facade, and mainly in the 1980s when this granite cladding was put around the storefronts in this portion of the building. We have done probes in selected areas behind the granite, And what we have found is that the original condition was really quite thoroughly hacked away. There are lots of areas of exposed original steel. There are areas of brick infill of various periods. If there are areas of the original limestone that survive in sufficient amount to be kept, we didn't see them. But if they are revealed at the time that we peel off the rest of the 1980s, we will work with staff to incorporate any of that, if there's enough of it to incorporate. Views of the building in its context. What happened was in the 20s, taller building was built immediately to the north. And at that time, the entire north wall of the building was completely concealed from sight. I'll also note that we are proposing, as you'll see, rooftop construction, including 1 story of habitable space to replace the partial story of habitable space that's up there now, and an enclosed story of HVAC above. But all of this, to the degree that it is seen in the context of this taller, later construction. Close-ups of the 1980s condition on 7th Avenue and on 36th Street. And there is that main entrance on 36th Street, and here is that parking area. The main entrance, this is a close-up. It had this metal-clad enframement and clear-story window, metal and glass canopy, and then it had a revolving door in the center with fixed windows with panels below on either side. As you'll see, we're planning on a new main entry here, which is very much based on this treatment, but which includes doors in all 3 of the bays rather than the center door flanked by windows. Photographs from the 1920s. By this time, the main entry was already changing. The entry circulation was shifting to this corner of 7th Avenue and 36th Street. There were canopies placed there at this point. Here's the tax photo of 1940, at which time the main entry of the hotel is here at the corner, and the canopy has enlarged by this point in the current view. So an overview of what we are proposing here is an existing south elevation, which we've chosen as typical, and a proposed. So we're really talking about just general repairs and maintenance in the middle portion of the building. The changes we are proposing are at the roof and at the base of the building. At the roof of the building, we now have a combination of one partial story of occupiable space, which was hotel service areas originally, and then bulkheads and mechanicals above. Our proposal is to have 1 floor of occupiable hotel function space, and then above it to have enclosure, which encloses not occupiable space, but miscellaneous mechanicals needed for the hotel use. And then above, there are mechanicals and bulkheads that are needed. So I'll just mention that we are proposing visible construction. But I think it's kind of interesting that this level of mechanicals, frankly, is what's needed for a contemporary reinstatement of the original hotel use. So here, to try and make this clearer for you, are axonometrics of what we are proposing. This darker bronze-colored treatment here is the 1 story of usable hotel function space we are proposing, and then the lighter portion above is the enclosure for the HVAC, and then above that are the various HVAC and bulkhead installations. We didn't want to enclose the whole thing because that would have made this enclosure too big. If you look at these colors, which are red, I think, in your handouts, but look a little bit brown here, these are the areas of visibility from the street, and we will show you these in more detail.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
Just so you have the one floor of occupiable space. Above that, is that another floor, and that's where you have your mechanical equipment?
Yes, it's a floor. It is enclosed, and it has I believe it has a roof.
It has a roof, and then,
But it's not meant to be used for anything other than mechanicals.
right, and then on top of that, on top of the roof, some of those mechanicals are taller and it goes through, or those are added, those are extensions of the mechanical?
Other extensions above. Those are bulkheads, generators, things that need to be on dunnage, that sort of thing. So there's the visibility as seen from the south and the east, and this is the visibility as seen from the south and the west.
What involved this? Is there any modification to the skylight openings as mentioned in the initial?
Yes, I'm gonna show you those in a second. So here is what we are proposing. We are proposing a new base and storefront treatment, which, as I said, restores this as the main entrance, keeping the original fabric that survives, doing a simplified new glass and metal canopy based on but not replicating the original, and doing 3 leaf doors here rather than the center revolver and windows that had been there previously. We are proposing to bring down the original masonry in these crucial locations. It already exists here and here, and we're proposing to bring it down here and to reconstruct the entablature as necessary here. And our proposal for this would be to use cast stone. We think that we can get a very good match for whatever original limestone survives using the cast stone. So this would be a bronze finished metal combination of aluminum and steel for the storefronts. Just as a quick sort of reference point, Stonehill and Taylor are the architects for this project. They have been the architects for a number of hotel projects, including 2 that were reviewed in recent years by the Commission in the Madison Square North Historic District. This is the ACE, and this is the Nomad. And the approach to storefronts and the level of quality and design we're proposing here will be very similar to what you've seen at the ACE and the Nomad. So finally, in answer to Commissioner Goldblum's question, this is an existing and proposed roof plan. So what happened in the 1980s, and you can see it here, is that these 2 courts, which had been open, were enclosed. They were also built in and closed in from the inside to become largely usable space. Our proposal reopens these courts and restores them, in one case, to its original dimensions, and in another case to something much closer to its original dimensions. So these are entirely interior features, but I think it is important to note that the courts have been closed to the weather and closed in, and we are proposing to reopen them to the weather and to open them dimensionally. Finally, this is the north elevation, which again has been rendered invisible from the street because of this taller 1920s building. There is a chimney right here, which makes the space between these 2 buildings too narrow to meet code for the hotel use. So we're proposing to remove that chimney, and we're also proposing to enclose this recess, which is located here for hotel use. So this was meant to be an executive summary. My apologies for making it so long. Paul Taylor will go quickly through the slides to show you the detail of it.
Good afternoon. Bill did actually save my own presentation, but But I think Bill covered this pretty well. So this is the south elevation. We have a blow-up, and I'll go over it in more detail. This is the 7th Avenue. We covered that as well. The rear of the building. So this is in that 10-foot court in the back. Essentially, we're just going to be restoring the windows that are there, and then we're infilling this slot over here and having windows to match the adjacent windows.
But that slot is, it's not visible, correct?
That is correct. So this is basically, other than restoring the facade on the east elevation, there's nothing else. So these are the sections, and this is what was being described, that there's currently a series of sort of cantilevered out floors there that has reduced the court down to a fraction of its original size. And we're depending on that court on the east side to be for light and air. And so we're going to be bringing that back and trying, going through an application.
Is that how you get the FAR to fill in that?
The vent?
You got it, exactly. So this is the existing first floor plan, a partial floor plan, and I think the purpose of this is to show that we're taking the 7th Avenue former entrance and returning it back to its historic entrance on 36th Street with all the detail that Bill already described to you. The revolving door and the pair of swing doors. So if you look in your leaflets, it kind of picks it out and describes the materials. There's a colored elevation, which I think is next, which is, I think, clear. So I'll just skip to this. So this is the replacement cast stone to match the rustication above. This is the entablature. We removing the granite that was put in the 80s. There would be this, new storefront, that would be detailed in the way you'll see in your handout. We'll go through in a little bit more detail. The original entrance portion of the fabric would be retained here. This would be new. We have our signage within the original Mills Hotel signage band. We'll go into the size of the signage and all that a little bit later. Seventh Avenue is much the same, so I'll go to the prettier picture. So same deal with this, same thing with the entablature, same thing with the corner. This is not going to be a marquee. It's going to project out within a canopy dimensions, but it will be the same language as we would be doing the marquee. It would all be done in a bronze color. Oh yeah, I want to say that also ownership wants to actually do the entrance in actual bronze. So this would be, the original entrance would be done in bronze metal. So this would be a one-bay typical enlargement. And we'd be picking up the panelized feel that was on that original fabric. We have a slightly more modern contour to the profiles on the pilasters, consistent with what we've done on those other properties that we had shown you earlier. The signage, dimensions, and all are all labeled on there. So this is, for the main entrance. I think it's more illustrative actually looking at the, oh no, that's here. Right, so this is the canopy. We have this low sloping glass roof to it. And since the street is fairly narrow there, you'll sort of see the fairly thin metal detail consistent with the original. Revolving door, the pair of exit doors.
Okay.
This is the smaller canopy on 7th Avenue. Again, picking up some of the same detail, but it doesn't project out in the same dimensions. Okay, so for the roof, the original roof bulkhead was here, and it was actually originally a de-licing area where they would spray down their guests or something, which I thought was kind of interesting. We don't usually have that in hotels now. Then they had their mechanical equipment sort of dispersed over the roof. And so what we're doing is we're pulling everything back. We have that first level, as Bill has described to you, which will have some public and functions for the hotel. And so these are the, the roof plans that Bill had described to you. Unfortunately, it's much sharper in your photographs. I apologize. So lightly up here are those pieces that stick out that you could see on the model. So the idea is that we would have the same language for the storefront of the occupied portion of the roof bulkhead as we have on the first floor. Then we would have a stucco limestone finish, and we would have the same bronze, we have a bronze coping and pick up the same language that we had.
Is there any reason why the floor plate and the footprint of the mechanical floor has to be identical to the floor below? In other words, has there been any consideration given to making that floor level smaller in order to reduce visibility, particularly along, I guess it's West 36th Street?
Yeah, so, it's a very good question. So, actually, our team has been working, we have sort of a large team working on this, and of course, the mechanical engineers always need more room, and the architects want to give them less room. So I think that this proposal is being made because we believe that it actually is a tight fit. Do you know what I'm saying? But, I don't say that, I'm not going to take that to my grave. I don't think we were trying to make it more difficult than we had to in coming towards you, before you, but that's a very good question.
And that goes for the 16-foot high clearance of this mechanical space as
Right,
well?
the same, yeah.
Right, so in other words, it isn't like, this isn't an early stage thing, there's been, developed drawings done. If it's a question of a couple of feet, I'm not gonna swear that, every exact foot, but there was a belief we wouldn't come here if we thought that there was excess room up in there. And I suppose we could have the actual mechanical plant layout, which actually would have been a good idea, Bill. So, anyway, I can't speak more to that other than that we're sensitive to that as well. There's certainly no architectural reason that we're trying to make the sightlines worse. I can say that. The side elevations, I think, are better seen in the 3D, but I think it's clear what's being proposed. So this is the sort of rendering of the finishes. So this is the views, which we're going to honestly show you what you see. So in so doing that, because it's kind of hard to see in the fuzzy photographs, we did this Revit model description, and we've also created pictures of see those little flags there? That sticks what you see in the mock-up we did in the field. This is what we do in our Revit model, what we think you see. Similarly, over here, those are the flags of the mock-up that was done in the field. And this is, what we believe the Revit model is almost identically the same. And that's what we colored on it. You can see it in the photograph, but it's impossible to see it here. So you can see that little bit sticking up there. That's the part you would see. Well, it's like impossible in the photograph, so this is the part that's sticking up here. So probably really the most conspicuous thing is if you're right in that original, like if you're entering the building and you look straight up, you would, would be sort of a telescopic view of the part that would peek out. So, yeah, that would be like, but it's quite a few stories up, but you would see up at the top a little piece peeking out over there. And then this over here. And this over here.
Okay.
Okay, these are the appendix. Oh, wait, we're not going through the appendix now. Okay. So,
Okay.
that's the presentation.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Yes, Maddie.
Just a couple. First of all, are you going to bring back Dubrow's Cafeteria, please? Which was down the block, which had such amazing New Deal murals in it. It was incredible. Two things. Firstly, did you say cast stone and not limestone? And the reason?
Paul can
Well, I mean, I guess from a cost perspective, the owner's perspective, you have a lot more control. I don't think that we're coming in here, I'm not going to personally say I would be unhappy if we were using limestone. I think that there's many examples, for example, on the ACE, the entrance to the ACE is actually all precast. We took a mold of the entrance on Broadway, and because it didn't exist, and we put it in on the other side. I don't think anybody knows. It was a choice in working with our ownership. It could be done either way. With my experience with precast is it can be done pretty poorly, and it can be done very well, in as much as limestone is actually the same chemical composition as concrete. It's a geologist once told me that, concrete is artificial stone. So the color, the mix, the aggregate, it's an art, not a science. So, I guess if we were to go in the cast stone direction, precast, we'd have to work very carefully with your staff level. And I just want to say that the samples we have here, this is a piece of limestone, so that would be our goal. And so it's been my experience with precast, you have to go through like 4,000 bad samples to get to the good sample. So that's the process we would take, working with staff if we were to take that direction.
How many samples would you have to go through with limestone?
Probably hit on the first one. I mean, it's Indiana limestone, it's pretty consistent.
Diana?
Yeah, this is a question about the storefront area. Looking at the original building, it's obviously, it descends very solidly, but, since over time, obviously, we have storefronts at the base, so it's going to be a lot more open, and obviously, that's something that is, you can be very comfortable with. The question is, I guess, for me, I wondered whether you considered using maybe some masonry a little bit to have a more sense of the verticality of the building descending. Like right now, the rhythm, I can see the rhythm that you've used, but for me, it doesn't connect as much to there's two flanking buildings and a center building. And by broadening out maybe a couple of the descents, even if they weren't masonry, but just in your current vernacular that you're using, it would give more sense of the connection of the upper and lower floors, the bottom, which originally was very, very strong and is kind of, in the original, the version you're working with before right now is totally almost gone completely. And you're trying to restore that somewhat. And I wondered if you considered any other ways of, bringing.
Yes, this is a problem I faced before. So essentially, it was not a retail environment then. It was like just basically like a bank vault building.
Yeah.
So once you start doing this, you're a little bit returning it back to something it never was. and trying to do it, I think, trying to keep to the language that of the period of the, early 1900s, which we gave those earlier examples.
I don't have a problem with the materials, really,
So
or the openness.
At the Ace Hotel, we, responding to that exact question, inside of this sort of form, this sort of wide flange form that goes up and down here, we actually put in certain locations limestone, into it. I have to say, I'm not so happy with that. It's what we did to get it approved. But it doesn't look bad. It's just that this is so massive over here. I'm not sure whether you have a thin one over here.
Yeah, I understand.
Then you make it massive, but it takes away from the retail value underneath. So if we had to, that would be what I would direct you to, and you can go see it installed. That's my answer.
Okay.
Again, I'm just trying to see where the
I think
verticals,
Bill has a point.
how the verticals
Yeah.
descend when you look at the entire building. Is it really bringing it down? Not necessarily masonry. I can, see that maybe we couldn't go that way.
If I can just briefly,
Yes.
we really did want to do this right, and we thought about, we thought about whether we could insert more masonry in the columns. And Paul, maybe if we go back to the,
Yeah, I wanted to look at the existing photograph. There's none of that vertical.
Yeah, I was going to
We
say,
understand.
I realize it's totally
I
gone
think we did
there.
give an ode towards that. It just
Definitely.
didn't go the whole way.
actually, that's exactly the right point.
And
This
I
big-
agree. I was
this
just looking
big
at the
thing
rhythm of,
happened. But what remained in place were all of the steel columns that had been heavily encased in masonry. And we thought that ultimately, rather than doing little skinny enclosures of the
Right.
structural columns, or bringing these absolutely massive things down,
Yeah,
which still
I
would be in a
understand, yeah.
different relationship, the right thing to do was to strengthen the corners so that the reading of a solid masonry support was established at the corners, and then to have this be an infill system, which is really kind of what they started doing in the 1940s and kind of made an irrevocable decision when they did that.
But just building on that and what Diana said, on this facade, the building turns, right? What happens in the center? It's just the footprint above, it cuts in?
It's like a slot. It's like
Right,
an outer
okay.
court.
It's like an outer court.
Right.
And so this is one area, and I'm not saying it's the right thing or wrong thing, but it seems that you could have expressed sort of the stronger, thicker masonry.
You mean here?
Right, exactly.
Right, so I think the reason why.
That was never there.
I'm sorry?
That was never masonry. He's restoring it more or less as it was in that.
Yeah,
Not
in
the
inner
infill.
part.
I'm not talking about the infill, I'm talking
The
about either
corners.
side. Yeah, the two corners.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, that was
that's
a
how
pretty
it
heavy
is.
pier, it's true.
Yeah.
So I
Oh, I
think,
hear what you're saying. You're.
I'm talking about,
I want to get to the
yeah.
start.
Only
So
the
pretty
se-
much we're doing the right thing from here to here, and so what
That's
you're
great.
saying, the width from here to here.
Right, because there you've, in the other situations, you've
That's the
made a
light fit
conscious
corner, yeah.
decision to do another material. Here seem to be wanting to continue the masonry, but then you've changed the dimension. Just a question.
We could, it's a good question, but
Does
can
it-
you go back to the
does it
previous-
turn-
Yeah, I think
Change your
to be hon-
rhythm?
To be honest,
Yeah.
I completely hear what you're saying. I think we have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to point that out. We have an existing loading dock here in our exit doors for our stairs that come out, and we're squeezed between the loading dock and the masonry, and that door is what's left. Am I right, Michael?
There is existing doors to the right. There is existing door to the left. I can't recall the proximity of it. to the
But let's just stick to
original.
the door, we want it to be symmetrical. So am I right to say that this door goes up against the loading dock?
Correct.
So I think that the right one has to be the width that it is, and I mean,
We're not going to
it would
make
be
one.
irritating if we have to change our plans, but
Yeah.
we could do that.
Just go to 2D and you'll see what it looks like.
Oh, yeah, perfect, perfect.
And then there's the other corner, actually.
Right.
Yeah, there's a loading dock. Actually, what I want to do is go to the floor
That's
plan,
interesting.
because that's going to show it on the floor plan,
5.
not only for your benefit, but for me. Right, you see what I'm talking about? This is our loading dock from here to here. And this is our stair that comes out, that's squeezing through.
But on that point, couldn't that stair go into the lobby and then egress?
We have,
Is that a lobby?
yeah, we have one to the lobby. One is coming up from the cellar, and one is coming from above. So we have one of our stairs goes to the street directly, and one goes out through the lobby over here. So we would not have that flexibility.
Paul, could we look at the historic photograph for just a second? I just want to make one point, whatever that is.
I'm not suggesting you try to go back there, obviously.
No, I mean, that's perfect. We certainly thought about this, and it's tempting to look at this as a pier, but there's a change in plane that occurs right there.
Is that where you've cut it off?
Yes, and what you've really got is you've got the masonry piers coming down, and by the time you get here, you can see it here, you're really getting into a different context, which is this whole rusticated context of what these original openings were. So this is really the pier, and this starts getting into beginning to
The
put
infill?
back this stuff.
All right, yes, go ahead, Roberta.
That's drawing the elevation for the existing on Oak Reed C is wrong, right? Because that door looks further over, so that's not correct. On your existing?
That is
Yeah,
correct.
you know what I'm doing? Go to the existing plan.
Okay, so then that's not. on
Okay, can somebody help me? Where's the existing plan?
That's all right, you know what, I think that existing plan, maybe that is correct, but it doesn't look like the same place on that elevation, your existing elevation, that's all.
Yeah, I think we drew it incorrectly.
The only thing that you don't see is in the retail space to the left of our main entry, there is a door that comes out there. We didn't show the plan because we haven't been able to get in that space and really survey that retail space. But as you can see in the photograph, there is a door there to the left of the entry as well.
All right, other questions?
Yeah, one more quick
Yes.
question. Just in terms of the roof elements, I'm assuming that the function of the new hotel piece that you're putting on the roof is sort of like a terrace, like Gramercy or other hotels, right? If that were not there, if it was just the mechanical, we wouldn't see it at all, it seems, from any sightline. Is that the case?
What do you see in the visibility studies is in some minor cases, it's the very top, the cornice of that occupiable first level. But what you're really seeing is what's above that.
It's
So
really
it's
just
the mechanical
That little piece
that
of
you're
the
seeing.
mechanical, which is why I was.
Right, but we wouldn't see that if if you didn't have the roof terrace
If it all
function
went- if it
down.
went right down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you also wouldn't see it if you
If it mattered,
didn't have
it
that
doesn't
area
really
at
matter.
all, which goes to your comment. So I think the only area that isn't like that is this centerpiece, which by its very nature is up that slot. Because everything else you're viewing it over here, because you've got this outer court here, it gives you such an angle of view. But if you actually go to the site, the amount you have to lean back in order to see it on 36th Street while dodging trucks is not that evident. But I think that's the slate.
And so
Okay.
there wasn't a way to somehow recess part of that roof plane so that you would not see what you see at all?
Right, so I
from the
think,
street?
yeah, I think the belief was coming in here that was not possible, but I think that, I know personally, I would go back and we would, be 100% sure, I don't, I've been fighting with mechanical engineers for the last 30 years, so one more fight.
Yes, other questions? All right, we can take testimony, then we'll come back and discuss. Kelly Carroll?
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. The applicant proposes to return the rusticated limestone piers in the form of CNUs to the corners of this building, which is fantastic. HDC would like to see more piers per facade treated in this manner, as this would visually anchor what is a grand imposing building. The building's massing will correctly read as heavy with the reintroduction of the piers, and the applicant has several historic photographs to identify which piers to restore. And just as one more suggestion, the Doralton and the Ansonia on the Upper West Side both had storefronts ripped out in the 80s just like this, and had CMU treatment for new ground floor retail that really resolved what looks like this problem is. And I encourage you to look at those examples because they were done beautifully. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? All right, Community Board 5 has sent in their resolution recommending approval. And wait, recommending approval and urging the applicant to use limestone at the base of the building. All right, any more questions for the applicant? All right, why don't we talk a little bit about, I guess there are different aspects to this proposal, and in no particular order, but why don't we talk about the rooftop additions first, since they're visible? Yes, Fred?
Yeah, the elevations, of course, are frightening until you understand the context, and then they're not so frightening at all. This narrow little, not even an alley, but just a space behind the building existed because of the historic photograph at a time when there was no building there, or at least low buildings. Now there's a very tall building behind it. So to me, that is most of the story. To see little glimpses of pieces of little roof areas popping up behind this don't bother me at all, because it's part of the gestalt of seeing stuff on the roof of almost every building in New York. So I don't think it distracts, for me, it does not distract at all from the enjoyment and appeal of the rest of the building. So I can accept it as it is, and even designed as it is, which is a little minimalist in the back, but again, nobody can see it.
All right, I mean, I would just say that I think I could support the size that they are right now. And in general, I think this is a neighborhood, this is in the garment center and has many, many things happening, much taller buildings as well. And but I think in terms of this as an individual his designated building, even if you do have portions above that, I would agree with Fred that they're caught in few glimpses here and there. But because I feel that the answer wasn't really satisfactory about how much you can reduce it, I would urge you to work with staff, because I think there are two ways that you can think about reducing the visibility. And one is, I think, both of them we touched upon. One is the footprint itself, or the ways to cut back. And I think, in my opinion, the best places to cut back is from the side, which is set back that little piece on West 36th Street, or from 7th Avenue, because those are sort of the two main viewing area corridors. And I think the other way is to just reduce the height, because we're talking about 30 feet, which includes both the floor, which is occupiable, and the mechanicals. So one thing to think about is that if you feel, and I don't think any of the sections actually show where that floor is, but if it's a case where your mechanicals have to be 15 feet floor to ceiling or floor to floor, then I don't know what that means in terms of the floor below that as well. So I think that there are ways probably where you could adjust the overall height of those two floors, either by giving in the mechanical floor or giving in the floor below that. Yes.
And on some rooftops that we've seen in other districts where we have done visible rooftop additions, I don't think we've generally done them in stucco. I think we've generally suggested that they be done in metal, so that they kind of read more like rooftop accretions and not as extensions of the building. That might, actually for the center one, which is very visible, that might, I think, make it a little bit better than stucco.
Okay. Yes.
I'm much less concerned with what's going on the roof as I am with the facade, and I would say this being an individual landmark, even the folks in the 1980s used stone at the street level, and so my approval would go along with reestablishing limestone at the base of this building.
I think that makes sense. All right, just going back to the rooftop, and then we'll go to the ground floor. Are there any concerns about the rooftop otherwise? So why don't we, yes?
I think that there are ways, and I think that maybe even part of the discussion would have indicated that there would be ways to reduce it, but I would think that they should come back. I would like to, instead of just saying to staff,
Well-
especially if we're also going to talk about
Well, let's hear the full set of comments before we get to that stage. All right, so one is that they work with staff to try and reduce it, and we'll think about whether they need to come back. Let's talk about, yes, the ground floor, which is the other major sort of intervention, and I think Michael Devonshire's suggestion about going to limestone, I think will go a great deal. I think that what they're proposing at the ground floor generally is a big improvement over what they have right now. Yes.
I agree. I think it's great that what they're doing. I think the entry lobby restoration or modified restoration is very nice. And I think the corner piers are really good and certainly should be in limestone. But I think that, like Diana and the testimony was suggesting, I think that additional line, I mean, one of the essences of this building as an individual landmark was the weight of the base. And there has to be a balance between recreating that in the course of doing work on the base and allowing for the current use. And I think that the solution posed here is a bit too extreme on the storefront end. And one of the things that's so striking about the existing condition is not just that it's ugly and awful in the color choices and things like that, but that single C-shaped band ties the building together in a way that it was never meant to be tied together. And if you look at the architecture of the elements, right, of the two big boxes that make up this building, each of them on all facades are divided into three parts, two ends and a middle. And that's how the fenestration works above, that's how the old storefronts were, that's where those jogs were. So I think that at the very least for me, the restoration of the corner piers at each of those kind of projected bays above is important. And as the testimony said, there are lots of examples, both on the Upper West Side and Ladies Mile, where you have downtown, Tribeca, Soho, where you have heavy masonry piers that frame individual openings, interspersed with longer stretches of storefront, where you would be able to have quite lovely stores that can return quite lovely rents, and you could still bring some of that weight down and restore the weight to the ground floor. I think it's more of an issue on the corner and on 7th Avenue than it is at the entrance of the building, where you do have those pillars. But I think that a creative solution could even be thought of at the entrance to the building.
All right, other comments? Yes, Dan.
Yeah, I obviously agree with Michael, and I also about the sense that this is a very tripartite building, that there are these two sections in the middle, and the fenestration, everything reinforces that, and I feel like the descent to the bottom doesn't adequately reinforce that. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, and I'm not looking for some, huge amount of masonry or something, but just agree with you.
All right, other comments? All right, so, but just on the masonry, do we have sort of a suggestion, or would like them to come back to sort of show more masonry at the base? No, sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I think I'd prefer to have a...
Okay, if the commission is comfortable.
It's so clearly said. I mean, if the staff thinks that it's too weird and it needs to come back, they'll say so.
Okay, so we can ask them to work with staff on that then. That sounds good. All right, so why don't we then close the hearing? And if I hadn't closed it already, I'm closing it now. I think I hadn't. Michael, do you want to read the resolution?
Okay.
Thank you.
Regarding 45 7th Avenue, also known as 41 to 49 7th Avenue, and 155 to 163 West 63rd Street, the Mills Hotel Number 3, an individual landmark, I recommend approval with modifications. Finding that the proposed removal of non-historic marble cladding and metal infill at the base of the building will not result in the loss of any historic fabric, that the building originally featured large window openings at its base, some of which were altered for commercial use early in the building's history, That the proposed dark finished metal storefront infill proposed for the base of the building is in keeping with the materials, finish, configuration, and articulation typically found in buildings of this age and style, including similarly constructed residential hotels. That the proposed double-height storefronts divided by metal spandrels will recall the historic proportions of the raised basement, piano nobile, at the building's base, while also accommodating the altered interior floor slabs. That the proposed signage will be proportional and in keeping with the simple aesthetic of the new storefront infill. That the proposed restoration of the building's rusticated corner piers and molded string courses will reestablish the historic proportions of the building's base and provide an appropriate frame for the new storefronts. That the main entrance vestibule on West 36th Street will be restored for use as the main building entrance, and that the remaining historic elements will be retained and refurbished, and that new infill elements will be detailed and finished to harmonize with them. That the metal infill and glazed marquee proposed for the restored entrance vestibule will recall the historic proportions and detailing of these elements, including transoms and bulkheads. That while the chimney bay at the northern end of the 7th Avenue facade was intended to continue the design and materials of the main facade, it is recessed from the main facade plane, and therefore its removal will not detract from the unity and symmetry of this facade. That the north-facing facade return at the location of the removed chimney bay will be clad and detailed to match the historic materials and design of the 7th Avenue facade. That the proposed reopening and reconfiguration of interior light courts will bring these features closer to their original condition and will therefore reinforce the integrity of the building's plan and its architectural significance. That the northern light court is not visible from the street, and therefore the proposed infill of this feature will not be perceptible and will not substantially alter the building's plan, and that there is precedent for utilitarian rooftop structures on buildings of this age and style. However, I recommend that the applicant work with the staff to do the following. First, to examine the possibility of reducing the visibility of rooftop structures and to explore alternate materials for the visible portions of those structures, and at the ground floor to increase the amount of masonry, especially to try to emphasize the vertical qualities of the rest of the design.
Second.
Did we talk
And
about
also,
limestone?
all the material to be used at the base will be limestone to match the existing material.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, good. This application's approved.
Thank you very much.